reminder. What time did you send that?
Just right after you asked for it. When did you?
No, sometimes it's been slow coming through for some reason. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have the same problem. So
I thought it'd be interesting because we were talking about the humor, right?
Humor, yeah, yeah. So simcha and humor is joy and humor, the same things, and that's something we kind of see with this, looking into these texts, into these sources of how the rabbis view humor, how they view joy, how they view. So we'll go over quickly the things since you weren't here last week. Mm-hmm. Just quickly. So we have some things that are negative against laughter. The very famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, Rabbi Akiva said, excuse me, that Schoik v'kalas roish margilim la'erva, that laughter and lightheadedness, levity, lead a person to promiscuity. So that's pretty negative. The next one we have Gemara in Brachas that says Rabbi Yochanan said in Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that a person should not fill his mouth with laughter in this world, because it says in the Psalms, we say something before the benching, before Birkus Hamazon, it says Az Yamales Chokpino L'Sheinen Urina, then our mouths will be filled with laughter, and our faces. Our mouths will be filled with laughter, and our tongues with song. Excuse me. Say a Masai. When is that going to be? So then, the verse continues. Shiur b'goyim higdil Hashem la'asos meila. When the nations say the Lord has done great things with these. So Amar Olav al Reish Lakish. Shemiyamav le'malei schayk pivo l'mazem kishmaya m'Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi. Remember, we've learned before the story of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish was a bandit who turned his life around, and he married Rabbi Yochanan's sister, and he was a student of Rabbi Yochanan. And as soon as he heard this teaching from Rabbi Yochanan, he never filled his mouth with laughter again. He accepted that upon himself. That he was. But then the question is, what does it mean to fill your mouth with laughter? And there could be discussion. How much laughter is filling your mouth with laughter? So then we have something that maybe gives a little bit more insight. Another Gemara in Shabbos. It's in Shabbos Lamed Beis, Shabbos 30b. It says that it teaches that the Shechina doesn't rest, meaning a prophet doesn't receive prophecy. Lo mitoch atzvus, not among depression. V'lo mitoch atzlus, and not among laziness. V'lo mitoch schok, and not among laughter. V'lo mitoch kalas rosh, and not among lightheadedness. V'lo mitoch sicha, and not among empty conversations. V'lo mitoch dvar betelim, and not among empty words. So we're just going over what we had last week, so you didn't really miss. It says, "Elamitoch davar simcha shel mitzvah." However, how does one receive prophecy? He can't be depressed. He can't be lazy. He can't be laughing too much or too lightheaded or empty. So, what does he need to have? Mitoch simcha shel mitzvah. Among the mitoch dvar simcha shel mitzvah, a word of joy of a mitzvah. And we derive this from, in the book of Kings, and I actually find several places, both in Samuel and Kings, where music is attached to prophecy. So there was one case, I think it was Elisha, I don't remember, I should have done my homework again. I remember the story, but I'm pretty sure it was Elisha. He was upset, who was a student of Eliyahu, of Elijah. He was upset something the king said to him, and the king was saying, please give me a word of prophecy. And he's like, I'm not in the mood to give you a word of prophecy. I can't. So the king said, prophesy for me. It's like, I just can't turn it on and off like a light switch, a water faucet. So what did Elisha say? So he said, all right, Kechuli my nagen, v'aykenagen managen tiolav yad Hashem. He said, go get me a musician. and the musician plays, then it'll help me get into the right mood, into the right frame of mind, and I'll be able to. And then the hand of Hashem, the hand of the Lord, came upon him as soon as the music started playing. So meaning that he got into a different mindset. He was able to focus. So we see there that the quality, the usefulness of music. Similarly, meaning, I think something we can kind of get out of this is the same thing with laughter. Are we using laughter as a tool to serve God, or is it an end to itself? So if it's to an end to itself, then it's empty and a waste of time. But perhaps just like music can bring a person into a happy frame of mind, so too a joke, humor can, and we're going to see that in a moment. He says, "V'chein l'dvar halacha." So he said it's the same thing, not only to receive prophecy, but to learn Torah. Meaning, when we learn Torah, we're receiving God's word, even though we don't maybe have it in a supernatural sense the way the prophets had. We already have it in the book, so we don't need. But still, even if you could be sitting reading a book and you're not in the mood, you could be sitting and listening to a lecture, you could fall asleep. So you have to be in the right mood. So it says, so too for Dvar Halacha v'chein l'cholam, also for l'cholam tov, for a good dream. If you're in the right mood, you can have good dreams and useful dreams. Eini, so the question for Amar of Gidel Amar Rav Kol Talmud Chacham Sheyoshev L'nei Rabbi V'Einsev Soisav Noitvis Mart Kavenu. So first they said, is that really true? Because really, when you're listening to Torah teaching, you should be like filled with bitterness, and we're gonna skip a little bit what it says here, because it says Haba Rabba Haba Talmud. So one says that one is the teacher and one is the student, the frame of mind. Meaning, because first we're going to say, what kind of mood should you be in? Should you be in a serious mood or in a joyous mood? Or so it would seem that it's talking about you should be in a serious mood, but then he says, no, you could even say that, so one says, meaning the teacher should be in a happy mood and the student should be receiving in a serious mood, in almost a bitter mood. Or you could say also that the teacher himself or herself could have both the serious mood and the bitter mood, and kind of be able to oscillate the consciousness somewhat. Meaning, when you start the lecture, before you start and after you start. Why? There's Mikame the Pasach Lahul Rabbanan. Rabbah, one of the great rabbis of the Talmud, before he would open a lecture that he was giving to the rabbis, to his students, he would say a joke. He'd tell a joke. The rabbis would laugh, the students would laugh, and then he would go into a more of a serious note, and then he would be able to, and he would sit with awe, meaning would also maybe say some Musar idea, something to make it a bit more serious mood. You start with a lighthearted mood and a serious mood, and then he would give his lecture. I remember one of my Rebbeim said, kind of maybe secretly, today Billy Graham passed away, and he said, he learned a lot listening to Billy Graham on the radio once in a while. Like he said, he would have a driver who was Christian, and he would listen to, and he said, I'll hear a good joke, I'll hear how to speak, I'll hear how to, and the interesting thing was, I was reading on Twitter, things where people were writing about him. So they said that Billy Graham said that, he's just passing through the world, but his real home is in heaven. And I said, the Chavetz Chaim said that before, before he was born. He was 99 years old. So the Chavetz Chaim was still alive when Billy Graham was born, but they were in different worlds. But on the same planet. But but there's the story of the Chavetz Chaim. There's a famous story. There was a rich man. He came. He heard about this very famous rabbi, and he said, Where's all of your nice furniture and everything? This is how you live?" And then he said, "Well, where are yours?" He said, "What do you mean? I live in Warsaw. I don't live here in Radin. I'm just passing through." He's like, "I'm also just passing through." He's like, my mansion is in the next world." So we see here that humor can be used as a tool, but then we see that there's different terms used. There's chok, which is a Hebrew term, and badchanus, which is an Aramaic term. Are they really equal? It's not clear. So then we have another source here, just two words, b'miyut chok, that there's a list of 48 ways to acquire Torah, and one of them is b'miyut chok, with a little bit of laughter. What does that mean? So there's two ways we could learn that. One is that it means you should try to limit how much you have laughter and humor. But the other means is that you should still have a little bit. You can't be totally, completely serious. You have to be a balanced, normal person, and part of the human experience is humor and laughter. And, one of the mainstays of humanity, something that really humanizes us. Because I don't think, even though we see animals kind of have a sense of humor, but not quite in the same way that humans do. Yeah, and even a little baby starts to develop a sense of humor in a way that you don't see the dog has that sense of humor. Certainly not the cat. So yeah. Dogs and cats both have personalities. Dogs tend to have a little bit more of a sense of humor, though, I think. Or they don't take themselves that seriously. Cats, and they take themselves very seriously. So I don't have pets at home, but my parents do. So I have allergies. I can't. So the Gemara in Tainus, ad hochi v'hochi, also hanich trei asi, hamalei hanich nami b'nei alma da asin inhu. Azul gabayu. So there's a story in the Gemara in Tainus, Chaf Beis Amud Aleph 22a, that I don't remember who it was. It doesn't say the name here. One of the rabbis was walking along with Elijah the prophet. He was familiar with Elijah the prophet. He would hang out with him, Not hang out, because hanging out indicates wasting time, but he would spend quality time with Eliyahu Hanavi. And Eliyahu Hanavi told, I don't remember who the rabbi was, he said, these two men over here, you see them in the market, they're going to go to Olam Haba, they're going to heaven. He said, so he went over to him and said, "Well, what do you guys do for a living? What do you spend your time doing? Whether I don't know if it was their livelihood or if it was just something they did." And he said, "Well, we're comedians, and if we see someone is depressed, we go cheer them up, and if we see people are fighting, we make peace between them." And that's why. So we see that bringing joy and humor and making people laugh is a very positive thing. It seems to be something that's quite respected, as far as the Elijah the prophet himself should say that because these people go, but again we see that they're purpose driven, and it doesn't even seem that they're out to be famous or to make money, to get rich. Their purpose and their humor was to cheer people up who are depressed, to make peace between people who are fighting. That's a worthwhile cause, and they're using, like I said, they're using their humor as a tool. Just like we had that Rabbah used humor as a tool to get people's attention, so they should be able, and get people in the right frame of mind, so they should be able to study Torah. So these comedians, their purpose, they had a purpose-driven aspect to their comedy, to their humor. I mean, comedy, it has a really different meaning, especially in ancient times. Comedy meant just a story that had a happy ending. You could have a funny story, a play that's funny the whole way, and it ends off with everybody dying. That's a tragedy. And it could have a pretty depressing, scary story, and in the end, there's a happy ending. That's a comedy. That's how the ancient Greeks, they divide comedy and tragedy. So maybe comedy is not the right word. Humor is probably a more accurate word. Um, so we had this next one, which we also read. All these we read already last week. This next one, which we read, is kind of difficult. I don't really understand it so much. But the point was they were trying to get Rabbi Zera to laugh, and they couldn't get him to laugh, and so they were telling him all kinds of outlandish, crazy things about what's the law of if a woman is pregnant with an animal, and could her husband accept a marriage proposal for the animal that's in his wife's womb, and crazy things that couldn't be, just to kind of be outlandish and crazy and non sequitur, just to try to get Reb Zera to laugh, and he wouldn't laugh. Today I had a phone call from a rabbi who's a very serious person, and you have to figure out how to get what you want out of him. He called me because he had told me something some years ago about a certain situation, and I applied that to a new situation. So he called me up. He's like, I don't know if it applies to this situation. And another rabbi claimed that you said, and I said, well, I didn't say that you applied it to the situation. I'm applying to this situation. I said that you applied it to that situation, but then I hadn't spoken to him in some time, and so then I spoke about something I read that he had written in an interview they had with him within a magazine. That I was able, because if I asked him, how are things in the neighborhood, that he didn't want to talk about, but if I talked to him about something intellectual and that he was interested in, I remember I was in the airport, and it was probably 2002. On my way to Israel, I had tickets because my flight was overbooked, so I got bumped, and so I got a free ticket to go to Israel again, after when I was on my way back from studying for the year. And so I went and spent a week in Israel or something, and I was sitting in the airport, and I saw Rabbi Abraham J. Tversky. And I was like, I'm gonna try to talk to him, make a conversation with him. So I was like, I'll ask him a question from some Hasidic literature, something from 200 years ago. I'll ask him a question, and then from there maybe he'll ask me, what's your name? Where are you from? I'll have a conversation with him. He answered the question, and that was it. It was obvious he didn't want to have a conversation. He's a very serious person, even though he's a person who uses humor. He tells stories that have humor, and he was friends with Charles Schultz, and they wrote together books for AA in the 12-step program, and but he also was he didn't want to. And then I turned around and I saw the parents of the Boyana Rebbe from Yerushalayim. They're Americans. His father passed away since then, and he wasn't well. He was but the Boyana Rebbe's mother, she had a nice. She wanted to have a conversation. I had a conversation with her. That's what I remember. But I saw recently something. One time I had a roommate in yeshiva. He was an orphan. He lost both of his parents in 2 different car accidents. A horrible thing, and his family had some connection to Boyan, and so every Shabbos he would go eat at the Boyana Rebbe's house. Unless it was an in Shabbos or something. Anytime he had that was the only place. He was a modern Orthodox regular guy from far Rockaway. Every week by the Boyana Rebbe. And so I said, can you bring me once, even though I'm not a Boyana Chassid, but it's interesting, a famous Rebbe like this. He said, I'll bring you one time. So he brought me one time, and his parents were there. So and I remember that week, the Boyana Rebbe said, next week is my son's bar mitzvah, and you should come. And we went to the shul, and it was packed, lots of people, and this Yerushalmi kugel everywhere, and we finally made it up to the 3rd floor where the Rebbe was making kiddush in a big room, and and packed with people. We were just there. We just wanted to see for a second. We didn't stay there for anything. We were on our way back from somewhere else, and we went to stop and see for a second. And they invited us, so we came by. And now I saw the pictures. I don't know if it's that boy's son already, or just to see how the time goes by. But it said something, a wedding for, I guess it can't be that quickly, but it said a wedding for a grandson of the Bayana Rebbe, and I was like, wow, I was like, because he's a pretty young Rebbe, and I mean, now, I guess it's years later already, he's not as young as he was 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was in Yerushalayim, but, it's just interesting that he already has grandchildren who are married, and, because my rabbi, who's in either his late 80s, early 90s, he just maybe a year ago married off his first grandchild. So it's a different world, I guess, So, so we're going to go a little further. Rashi there in the Gemara about laughter, he says, "Sechok b'chol tachpulus halalu asik Rabbi Yirmiyah lahavil b'zeir lidei sechok v'lei sachak the asa alom shemal piv sechok Rabbi Meir Rabbi b'zeir machmer tefei." It's interesting what Rashi says here. So he says that Rabbi Yirmiyah tried all kinds of ways to get Reb Zera to laugh, and he wouldn't laugh. And why wouldn't Reb Zera laugh? Because he says a person is not allowed to fill his mouth with laughter. And Reb Zera, he says, was overly strict, was extra strict. What does it mean he's extra strict? Because you are allowed to laugh, it's just you're not allowed to fill your mouth with laughter. So he didn't even want to laugh a little bit, because I was telling the other story, another young Rebbe from Yerushalayim, also American, who has a big following, the Karlin Stolin Rebbe. So two of my rabbis from high school went to Israel, and one he's a funny guy. He always, he was always just. It was always just everyone was always laughing in his class. I remember in high school, and he said they went into the Stolen Rebbe, and the Stolen Rebbe always has a smile on his face, but he's a very serious person. And this very funny rabbi was in there with him, and you could hear the Rebbe laughing 2 or 3 times, and like they asked him, what did you say to get him to laugh? And he said, he said, he said, well, why are you here? The Rebbe asked him, he said, Weinberger took me here. And he said, well, why did Rabbi Weinberger bring you here? And he said, I don't know, but I'll tell you, he took me on all these tours of all these cemeteries, and we saw all these dead tzaddikim, and so I'm here, I want to see a living one. So that's what we made. But he said a few other things. So we have here a Rambam that says, and I think this is kind of where we left off, a person shouldn't be crazy with laughing and everything, but also he shouldn't be depressed and mournful, but rather he should just be happy. That's what the sages say, that laughter and lightheadedness, that can lead a person to promiscuity. And so the sages commanded the person shouldn't be out of bounds with laughter, but also he shouldn't be depressed and mournful. El is called them to say but rather a person should always have a smile on his face and greet everyone with a smile. We're going to skip over some of these other sources and see. We have here the Maharit. We didn't. Well, actually, maybe we'll skip to the Tzidkas Tzaddik, but I think before we'll look at the Tiferes Yisrael. It's not that long. Tiferes Yisrael and Perkei Avos, who mashal schok v'hasla shagam ken miuta yafa. When we said miut schok, a person should have a little bit of laughter. So most people would read that to mean they shouldn't laugh too much. But the Tiferes Yisrael had the insight to say you should laugh a little bit. A little bit is good. That makes your soul happy. It was interesting what the Tiferes Yisrael says is that you should strive after an intelligent form of humor, and not just empty, and certainly not nothing that's dirty or lewd, but things that if you find an intelligent type of humor, that's that. And we all know what that means, and that's what it says in the first Psalm, "V'leu lo yibol," that his branch will not wither. Amnam sichas yoladim min astamah devrei tzchoik v'hasol bli lachluchis tevuna v'das. But if you're talking to just little kids, they're just gonna say nonsense that has no intelligence in it, and that doesn't make the soul happy. It just confuses the mind to listen to silly things little kids say. Although people like to hear the kids say the darndest things, and sometimes kids are smarter than the first Israel is giving them credit for, perhaps, but still, I know. So we have here the Tzidkas Tzaddik, which is Reb Tzaddik HaKohen from Lublin, and he was a great intellect, and really brought two worlds together in his own life. Because he grew up, he was not Hasidic, and he was a brilliant genius, a child prodigy. He wrote comments when he was 7 or 8 years old. So I think, this kind of shows something when the Tiferes Yisrael is talking about childish, when he's saying about things being about children, about words of children, I think he means childish words rather than words of children, because you can have very intelligent children, as the Tzidkas Tzaddik showed, because he wrote a commentary on the Rambam's Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, which is the laws of astronomy with the moon, with how to calculate how long a month is, and there's very difficult mathematics there, and astronomy, all kinds of things. And he was like 8 years old when he was writing a commentary on this. So so he obviously wasn't a childish person, even as a child. But later in life, he became a Hasidic Rebbe, the Reb Tzaddik. He had some issue. He was trying to get a heter me'Rabbanim. He was traveling all over Europe, and so he was visiting different rabbis. And when he came to the Ishbitzer, that's when he spent Shabbos there. And after, even though he wasn't so impressed at the beginning, but by the end of Shabbos, he became a chassid. That's the story goes. And he wrote these very brilliant, very intellectual books on Hasidic philosophy and thought. And so Tzidkas Tzaddik is, pre-Tzaddik is his writings on the Parsha, and Tzidkas Tzaddik is more of his ideological discussions with, although obviously there's ideology in his Parsha writings. But so he says, Beis minei schoikem. There are two types of laughter. Echad shesoichek me'eza beria ke'inyan schoik l'reyehu ve'yivazel eitzanis. He said one is to laugh at a person. That's insulting, that's disgusting, that's rude, that's leitzanis. L'tzad ha'heter shaboy leitzanusa devadazara ki ze inyan Yom Hippurim. And the interesting thing is the Talmud in Megillah says that you're not allowed to have leitzanis. You're not allowed to have this rude type of humor, except when it comes to idolatry. Idolatry, even the Gemara there has some very rude things to say about idolatry. Right there in the Gemara there. I'm not going to repeat it. If we were learning the Gemara, we would. If it was written here, I would. But it's interesting. But so he says, like sanas, the rude type of humor, that you can only use to insult idolatry, but then the other type of humor is but you can't be rude and insulting to other people, even if they worship idolatry. It would seem just the insult is against the ideology, not against the person necessarily. Although there's different discussions what that means exactly. But it's interesting. This is in the Gemara Megillah, which is the tractate of Purim. Kizeh inyan Yom Purim. He says this is the whole concept of Purim. Shutikun haschoik, the other. This is the rectification, the spiritual rectification of humor and laughter in the month of Adar. And that's why there is a Jewish custom to make laughter and also to insult Haman. Shahayahu lischoik tachas schoik aksil shahaya lefi shami Yisrael. Because there was a foolish sense of humor that the Jews engaged in originally when they participated in Achashverosh's meal, and that is why they had to be punished with this wake-up call that Haman wanted to kill all of them. And then we make a rectification, measure for measure, by using the same tool that was abused by partaking in the meal of Achashverosh, by using it now to insult idolatry, because Haman also, he had idolatry involved with him. He wore a necklace with an idol on it, and that's what, because you are allowed to bow to a person out of respect and not out of worship. So why didn't Mordechai bow in front of Haman? Is because Haman, the rabbi said, he was wearing a necklace that had an idol on it, and that's why he wouldn't bow to him. V'yesh min habeis d'schek shehu hailalos u'maisa naris ke'inyin yikumu na hanarim v'yischaykul lefneinu. So there's another type of humor and laughter which is wild and childish, as it says that the Philistines, who the Gemara says were very involved in making fun of people in a crazy way, they brought out Samson, Shimshon, and they wanted to insult him and make fun of him. And so we said the first type of humor is laughing at someone, and you're not allowed to use it usually except for to insult idolatry, and that's the idea of Purim. And the other type of humor is just a silly type of humor. And it would seem that Reb Tzadok is saying that when the Philistines were insulting Samson, perhaps it wasn't making fun of him, it was just a general atmosphere of humor that was childish, because it says, please rise now the youths. That it's a type of a youthful, childish behavior, although most likely they were also making fun of Shimshon, of Samson. But the point that he's bringing out here is that it was a childish behavior. And that you are also allowed to use for a mitzvah and to honor heaven. Like we had the Gemara before, where Rabbi would tell a joke to get his students, the rabbis, to laugh before they would start learning. Kasher guf ba'atzvus tzorich gam ken le'ashev ve'emsa v'shmaita ve'ein yachal limtzoi b'liboy simcha mitis. Why? And this is a psychological insight that Reb Tzadok brings. That he says the heart becomes wide, meaning you have an expanded sense of consciousness through humor, through laughter. He said because if the body is in a state of depression, then he cannot come to true joy. And a person has to sit with fear when he's learning, but the real fear is attached to joy. And if there's depression, he cannot come to the joy that will give him true fear, which is really awareness of God. This is an interesting thing. You could add and expand in humor. Shehu simcha medumas leponim, which appears to be happy on the face, even though it's not really in the heart. Meaning, if you're just laughing on your face and you don't have the joy in your heart, then it's empty. It's possible to be all, you see people, they're laughing, or are they really happy? And however, even if it's not really in the heart yet, it still helps to have a smile on the face, to have a little bit of a joke and happiness, because that can help the heart learn how to be happy. So there is. We don't really have time to go further. It's Pnei Yehoshua who talks about this as well, but we don't really have time. So you all probably have somewhere to go, no? Yeah, so we'll have to end here. So thank you for